Boys!
Hello and welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. Brought to you by funkandstuff.net, this is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am your host, Scott Dr. GX Wolfine, musicologist, creative arts journalist, and multimedia pro. Whether you're watching the video version of this show or the audio-only podcast version, I thank you so much for your continued interest and support in this show. If you enjoy this programming, there are several ways to help support Truth and Rhythm, as well as contribute to further enhancements and expansion, plus get some sweet perks and rewards in the process. First, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube, which is where Truth and Rhythm lives, and be an advocate by spreading the word among fellow funk, jazz, and R&B music lovers. Second, join Truth and Rhythm's new membership program through Patreon, which features 3 tiers for truth believers, truth seekers, and truth crusaders. You can also submit a direct donation to the cause anytime at funkandstuff.net. At that site, which is loaded with awesome content, you can also purchase the book Everything's on the One, The First Guide of Funk. Shop for official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff merchandise, and use the Amazon links for all of your online purchases, which allocates a percentage to this show. Sponsorship opportunities are available as well. Contact me directly at scottg@funkandstuff.net. For those of you who go the extra step in supporting the show, you have my heartfelt gratitude for allowing us to continue to shine the light on those special artists whose quest is to find truth in rhythm.
Did you guys still have as much fun cutting it up and cracking up and stuff as you can hear on, like, Exodus album and those records? Were you guys really having that much fun?
Well, yes. I mean, none of it was faked. I mean, it's to be honest, without having the sense of humor, that gig would have been not hell, but it would have been a lot more rough if we were if all of us were a bunch of wet blankets and had no, gift of gab or imagination or, a sense of humor. We wouldn't have made it. I mean, I'll say straight up, Morris Hayes is one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. I mean, just all day natural fun. I don't know why he wasn't a comedian. He's so funny. So he lightened the tension often, and I mean, but everybody, Tommy's he's kind of a funny dude too, and Sonny just crazy. It just like he just did things all the time, and he just that just kept us laughing. I can't really go into it because it's
But does Sonny sort of get away with more because he went back so far with Prince?
Yes, a little bit. Prince was a little more cautious about how he spoke to Sonny than the rest of us, because he knew Sonny could fight and would fight. Like, Sonny's reputation in the hood was don't mess with Sonny. Sonny had studied martial arts. Sonny had studied astrophysics in college. Like, Sonny Thompson is, how you hear about these people who are, they have problems fitting into society because they're just, their minds are too expansive.
Yeah.
Sonny's different. But by the same token, there's a symbiosis between me and him. It's like, if he's that crazy, I must be that crazy. Because everything that I understand about Sonny is through osmosis. It's through playing with him. Like, I've never worked with another musician that was so intuitive I mean, sometimes it's like Sonny was just taking dictation from a higher source. Like I was, my gift was knowing how brilliant he was and how to frame his ideas. Like we knew how to get the pistons working correctly, the up down, and that's what Prince really dug. And I don't know if he saw that ahead of time. I don't know if he heard us play together and went or I don't know how he figured that out. But it's Sonny's like somebody said Pierre Lewis, who was in the Lewis Connection, said to me one time, he walked up at Bunkers and Sonny and I were playing. He said, "Man, I used to think Sonny was just an outlier, but I think the both of y'all came down in that pod." Y'all came down in the same pod, huh? So I don't know. I love him. Sonny is, I mean, in many ways, the love of my life, man. And I don't care if you think it's in a gay way or not. That man is everything to me.
That's a beautiful thing,
Sonny is all. And Prince felt the same way about Sonny. He always, anytime anybody asked, I'm sure you have the Guitar Player magazine where they're, so tell us your influences. And Prince is like, well, really, the guy who plays bass in my band influenced me more than anybody else, Sonny. And they, we hear a distinct Santana influence, and maybe it's like, yes, you hear those things also. But if you're asking me who was my mentor, who taught me about music, it was Sonny, And then they interview Sonny, and then Sonny says, like, he said what? He was bad when I met him. Sonny doesn't take any credit for any of that. He's like, Prince already was on his way to becoming who he was. He's like, I just happened to recognize it. And, he come by the house. Apparently, Sonny's like, man, I'd be sleeping on my mom's couch. And Prince would come knocking on the door, it's open, Prince would come walking in and be asking if he could borrow, like, effect pedals. Sonny, gonna borrow your envelope follower? Yeah, man, it's over. Prince said that he and Andre used to walk over to Sonny's house. And in the Midwest here, we have these houses where you have the basements with the windows where you can see down in. And Prince said Sonny would be sitting on a mattress, no box spring, with a Stratocaster, a pig nose amp, and a wah-wah, and chain smoking in his mom's basement. And they'd be looking at him through the window. And they would, I think he might have said they were too scared to knock because Sonny, had a short fuse. But Sonny would see him and, y'all come in, man. And they'd watch Sonny just play for hours. And Prince was like, it was better than television. It was the most amazing thing we could see. And he said after that, all there was to do, was, hang around outside and swat mosquitoes, pretty much. Like that, Sonny was better than television.
Wow.
Yeah.
I could picture him out there on those cold Minneapolis, days, looking in there, getting
maybe
where it's warm.
I'm thinking that mostly was the summertime.
Okay.
But, yeah. But
hey, I was wondering, thinking of you and Sonny, did you guys tracks like Days of Wild and Get Wild and those kind of songs, some of those sound like they could have just been born out of you and Sonny maybe laying down a groove and just adding stuff on top?
They certainly were happening in the same era. And there was a remix of Get Wild that used a loop of me and Sonny prominently. But Get Wild took on a couple of different forms before you got to the version that was released. There was a version we recorded more like a live band, and then Prince kind of gutted it and, threw some electronic drums in there. He messed with the arrangement and some. I think he just kind of sampled and dragged in whatever he wanted from the live tracks and kind of reshaped the whole thing. He did that a number of times while we were there. That also happened with Race and 319. there are alternate versions of those that are like full on. Like there's a version of 319 with like that we cut with the MBG horns, like live all together, and it just, I think it was a little too too organic and like, and we missed the mark somehow. Like it wasn't really what Prince was looking for, and so he retooled it a bit, and then But I think all those decisions were were correct. So,
how much material do you think is still in there somewhere that people would enjoy hearing?
It's hard to say because he was so prolific, and it's difficult to know what was finished and what wasn't. It's one night out of nowhere, Prince called me and Sonny to come out to Paisley. He's got Maceo and Greg Boyer, and I think the dude's name was Ray, trumpet player, who was like a nephew of one of the dudes in the Booyah tribe. Mm. And he had that Booyah hair. And he had, and we cut probably 10 things that were all sounded like Little Richard. Like it was just bass drums, piano, and those three dudes playing horns. It was so much fun. And who knows if that'll ever see the light of day? You just don't know.
What was that like in the early 2000s? Or?
Oh, wow. Not super early, because Sonny and I were spending a lot of time in Europe between 98 and 2003.
So mid 2000s?
Post musicology for sure. Yeah. But just stuff like that. The day we cut 3121, we probably cut another 9 songs that weren't even on the record. It just, I mean, to give you an idea of the level of prolificity, we pretty much cut Lotus Flower in one single recording session. Like everything Sonny and I played on Lotus Flower, we recorded in one session. Just with Prince playing guitar with us and kind of giving us instruction on the microphone. We just went from one composition to the next.
Well, it definitely flows. And by far my favorite of the 3 records that came out in that set.
And that was with Larry Graham just hanging out. It's like I couldn't even get used to that. That was irritating me. Like, how you got a legend? Why is he hanging around? He's freaking me out. He's my idol. So with that tension also, like Larry Graham is watching me play drums. I don't know how to wrap my mind around that. So, and he was the coolest. Larry was so cool.
Yeah, he was really nice when I met him.
Yeah. So, I'm just saying, it's like, of what we did with Prince, and what he did without us, it's like, it's impossible to know. I got to peek into the vault one time. An engineer named Ray Hanfeld was putting a tape away in Studio A, and Prince had already gone to his office or wherever. And I said, I don't remember how the subject came up, but he was like, well, I got to take this down to the vault. And I was like, can I see? Yeah. So we took the elevator down and went in that room before the actual vault where he used to keep all his awards. They have them clearly, visible at Paisley Park now, but he used to keep all the Grammys and whatnot in this room. He had a trophy room. And it's literally a vault. The door is it's a vault. There's a combination, and Ray's turning the thing, click. He opens it, he switches the light on, and I'm still standing in the other room, just kind of looking in. I never actually set foot, but I did put my face in there and kind of do this. And it was just rows and rows of, like office shelving. Just imagine, I don't want to project, but somewhere between 10 and 20 of these shelving units and just tapes all the way from wall to wall. Plus, like some weird, like there was a movie that they shot before Purple Rain. I think it called like The Second Coming, maybe. Like that, the reels for that were just sitting in a cardboard box, like kind of close to where you come in the door. Just stuff, paraphernalia. It was crazy. I think there was like a half mannequin with one of Prince's suits on it, and it's it was surreal. But I didn't put one. I never put my foot in there. I always had a reverence for my position in Prince's universe. Some stuff is like unless he can say, "Oh, go ahead," I wouldn't do it. And so yeah, there's no telling. I mean, what I began to understand was that there are a lot of wow, this conversation is about to get deep. Are you sure you got time?
I got time, man. Go for it.
I'll try. I'll try to push through it in a comprehensive manner. There are alternate versions of a lot of songs that people already know in the vault, like maybe arrangements that didn't work out so well, or sometimes Prince would finish the track, using like more organic instruments like pianos and and acoustic drums and like standard fare. There might be two versions. There might be a version done with the Lin machine and synthesizers, and like two different versions of the same song. And I know that Prince had very strong ideas about harmonics and acoustic versus digital, and he was educated about it. Somebody somewhat recently got at me and said they took a book out of the Minneapolis Public Library downtown on 432 hertz. Do you know anything about sound?
Yeah, the frequencies.
Yes. Everything has been set at like 440, 441, 442.
Yeah,
but,
dynamic range and all that.
Yeah, but if you know anything about what happens at those frequencies, some of them are meant to disturb, like the spinal column. They're like some of that is, I mean, I don't want to say it's like
there's a science to it. Yeah,
it's scientific that certain frequencies will make you feel things, and and something was said about like the music business going to the standard level of 44.1 that had to do with how it affects people, like what it may inspire you to do or not do, and that it may all have come from like German technology, like Nazi Germany, like if we use this, we can irritate people to the point where they will submit to, you know what I mean? But at 432 hertz, apparently, everything is harmonious. All your chakras respond differently. And he said that in the book that he took out at the library, he distinctly recognized Prince's handwriting. Like Prince was writing notes in this book and highlighting, like in college. And he's like Prince had studied. Prince was not. He did everything with purpose. There was intent. And I think he was experimenting somewhat with, the differential between acoustic and digital and how it changed, how it made people feel, what songs sounded better in what way. I remember one day he just kind of not blurted out. He just, matter of fact, telling Rosie, like, your voice is a classic voice. You belong, in analog surroundings. Like your voice didn't sound right against synthesizers, and and I was like, that's odd. I hadn't even considered that. I'm 20, 19, 20 years old, and I'm listening, and I know enough to keep my mouth shut and just kind of But I never really understood what he meant by that. And he's like, no, you have a class. You're like Aretha Franklin. You're like the new Aretha Franklin. Your voice sounds better when it's accompanied by real instruments. And like he had definite opinions about when it was working on that level.
Do you have any idea like what part of his life he might have been studying that book?
I mean, I know I have no idea.
I'm just wondering if it was early on or mid or later or what.
I don't know. I mean, Prince is one of the smartest people I ever met, but I mean, he was also one of the most reckless people I ever met. So, I mean, it's like, I think about it sometimes. It's just like he was never happy with anything unless he could play with it, unless he could do something with it. He was not one to accept the natural circumstances of any situation. He was always tweaking it. I mean, fair enough. I mean, is that not funk? Is it George Clinton said, ain't nothing good unless you play with it.
Mm-hmm.
That's really it. That's what it is. It's like he's always his imagination and his attention span. Like Prince just, I'm certainly ADHD or maybe just, you know what I mean? Just like it was easy to bore him.
Everything was by design, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm. That's what I was saying. It's like somebody asked me, like, "Well, who do you think was better, man?" I'm like, listen, anybody who managed to stay in Prince's band for over 2 years is a qualified genius to me. Because you got to run his race. You don't have a say. If you could keep up with Prince, man, you're a bad dude or lady.
No question.
Something.
Did he ever talking about the recordings in the vault and all that? Did he ever say anything to you that, there were so many bootlegs that were coming out during the 90s? How do you feel about that? Was he pissed about it or?
Wow, you're really going for the real deal. I remember I was in Europe somewhere and some fan couldn't wait to give me a bootleg. Oh, okay, yeah. And so I heard a lot of things I had never heard before. It was maybe it was called the Jewel Box or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. And is Power Fantastic on there?
Probably.
Okay. I had heard that. And I had been listening to it at home, and I came into rehearsal, and Prince and I happened to be walking out of the sound stage together, and I said, "Hey," I said, "did Miles Davis play the trumpet on Power Fantastic?" And he turned, he said, "No." And why do you know that song? I don't remember how I got out of it, but I got out of it. I never did again ask about any bootlegs. But I'll say this, I mean, it's funny because I'm spilling so much tea, but he's dead. He can't sue me now. I had heard from a mastering engineer at the Hit Factory in New York that sometimes Prince would bring like a DAT recording of, a show or something he had been working on. The limo would pull up at the Hit Factory and his security would bring a DAT tape, of a recording. And he asked this particular dude if he could master it. Like he would hire a guy to master some of these bootlegs that would surface. So it's hard to say. It's like, was Prince planning all these? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like he certainly spoke out against it. If you were to ask him about it, it's like, how are you, making money off my music? Why is it, I mean, you'd get the standard fare. You'd get what you think you're supposed to get. That's my music. What gives you, why, how do you, where do you get the audacity? He always appeared hot about it. But then when I heard that, I was like, I'm not sure what to believe.
Playing both sides of the fence. Right?
Yeah, it's like certain things he wanted out there to be heard. But, I don't think he wanted anybody to start a franchise.
Let it trickle out in certain ways that I can sort of control.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like I mean, he again said to me one day, I don't know what's a hit. He said, I don't know what's a hit, and I don't know what people really want from me. I just create, and if there's an audience, great. But he really didn't have like any kind of crystal ball, or it was all happening on the inside. He was not I mean, really, he took so many risks because he was so unsure of the reaction. Like, well, why not try it? Who knows? He was not afraid to take risks, and especially, I mean, if you think about his first 3 records, Prince was supposed to be dropped after Dirty Mind. So suppose you got a 3-album deal and your first 2 records aren't, they did okay, but not, you still haven't caught on. He's got 1 record left, Dirty Mind is, I don't think I even have to say, is such a departure from the first 2 records. That's Prince going, well, it don't matter now. All that matters is that I get to say what I need to say.
Well, he even did that, Michael, after I Want to Be Your Lover was a pop crossover hit. Mm-hmm. He had that. He could have still tried to do that.
Yeah, but I don't think he had enough success at that point for the record label to go, great. Let's keep moving forward. Like, it was pretty much the writing was on the wall, is what I understand. Is that it was like Dirty Mind was the Hail Mary. So,
and then controversy came with things like Jack You Off and stuff like that.
That's what I'm saying. It's like there was a breakthrough. Maybe it was personally inside him, or, maybe it was the conversation he had with his management. Who knows what he was paying attention to. I mean, but whatever happened, Dirty Mind opened the door, and that's where he was at. After that, it was like, I don't know how to please anybody, really. I just got to be true to myself. And if it happens, great. If it doesn't, I can live with that as long as it's on my terms. That's really what I think the moral of that story is I got to tell it the way I see it. It might not be your cup of tea, but, I'm fighting for my life here. Music is my life.
Well, and then later on, he had such a foundational core of followers and believers that he had more license to kind of do whatever he might want to do.
Yeah, well, sure, because exactly. It's just incremental success from there. 1999, incredible. First, a number 1 single, When Doves Cry. Next, the number 1 single, Kiss. Like, he got on a roll, man, and it's and it's funny because I talked to St. Paul Peterson about this one time, and I was like, "What was that like?" He said, "Man, I was a fly on the wall. I was just a keyboard player in the time. I was like 17, maybe he was like 16 playing keys in the time." And he's like, "I just watched Prince just make decision after decision and drop song after song and never miss. It was uncanny. It's like he was just for a span there, he couldn't do wrong. He's like, I've never seen anything like it."
In that Pepe Willie conversation I mentioned to you, he said that the one thing was that there was no way, even when he was a teenager, there was no way that guy was going to fail and not make it and not do what he was setting out to do musically.
Yeah, I believe
single-mindedness.
Yes. And that can be very frustrating when you deal with other people who are not.
Yeah.
So I always kind of, deep down, it's like whenever he got like beside himself or needed to lash out, it's like, I get it, man. There's a war going on in you. You're fighting a very important war. Like part of me would sympathize. And the other part would be like, well, he's, he's always being that guy today. All right. But Tommy and Sonny and Morris and I, we got through it by venting to each other about it. you know.
Sure, yeah.
And then we come to find out many years later that that Paisley Park is apparently like bugged everywhere. Like, which put me in the position where it's like Prince's ego has to be like concrete, because the things we would say, out of anger, and for him to come back and go to work with us the next day knowing our true feelings about some of those things, I'm like, man, he's bulletproof. He must not be able to, like, nothing can get to him. We would be cracking up, and just you had to flush that out. It was not an easy job to do without the sense of humor, without being able to, step away from it and take it apart.
Calling him Skippy behind his back and stuff like that.
No, not that. But I mean, I'll be honest. The first time he played Days of Wild, it was like he really thought he had accomplished something. Like we heard the version that was supposed to go on the Gold Experience. And, I'm sure, we were nice about it. And, oh, yeah, that's cool, man. Yeah, said whatever we thought we needed to say, but I remember talking to Sonny. Sonny was like, man, that ain't hit. Something needs to change on that. They're like, he needs a rhythm section or something. We were somewhere in Paisley. And I don't think it's an accident that the better known versions of Days of Wild are all the ones where we're all playing together. It was so much stronger once we got a hold of it, and that version that he meant to be released, there was nothing was spoken about it after that. It just disappeared. They're like, maybe he heard us talking. It's hard to say.
Well, that's when that was fortuitous right there, if the better version came out.
Yeah, I remember, man, Lenny Kravitz would come out to the shows for a little while, and he'd be laying for Days of Wild. It's like, man, that song is like a freight train. Y'all playing that tonight? Yeah, Lenny, we playing it, man. All right. He'd be sitting, huh?
Oh, so sometimes you guys would be like 20 minutes on that jam, right?
It was the gift that kept on giving. Nobody ever got tired of it. It was like Night of the Thumposaurus people or something. You could get a good 10 to 20 out of that one. Yeah.
You talk about stirring the pot. I'm thinking about the MTV Awards with the pants and all that. Did you guys know that was going to happen, that stunt? And,
first you have to tell me, what are you calling a stunt?
When Get Off was done at the MTV Awards and Prince had the backless pants, that created such a stir.
That's what you're calling the stunt?
Yeah, it's sort of like a move to like get attention, right?
All right. Maybe
or to be controversial,
he's Prince. That was what he's supposed to do. It wasn't like I said, we weren't let in on anything. Things just went the way they went. So we're in the prayer meeting in his, dressing room at the Universal Amphitheater, which was where they were shooting the show. He comes out of the bathroom and into the prayer circle, like facing us. We don't even know he's got the butt out, slacks on until he goes to leave the room, and we follow him, and we're all walking to the stage, and nobody's saying nothing. But we all, all right, Prince, So that's when we found out, was maybe 7 minutes before we went on stage.
Wow.
But your viewers need to know that was not Prince's naked butt cheek. There was opaque material in those slots, and so it looked like that, but that wasn't what exactly was going on. It was just a little more elegant than that. Not much, but it was not bare cheek.
So, what can you tell people about, why you were no longer part of the group?
Why I'm not?
Well, why in the 90s or mid 90s, 96, whatever it was, 95? Why did you part ways?
Oh, wow. I got to say that once the band got whittled down to just being Morris, Tommy, Sonny, Maite and me, it was that kind of happened in conjunction with the war with Warner Brothers getting started. And that brought a lot of tension. Prince was, often agitated and beside himself during that period, easily irritable. And so we were kind of walking on pins and needles, and it was getting kind of intense for us also, just dealing with him in that state. And I think, over the 2 or 3 years that all that was going on, we were just becoming defiant, starting to talk back, starting to be disagreeable. We went to do some shows in Japan in early '96. I want to say it was January. And the equipment for some reason was going to take a longer time to get to Japan this time. Oh, I know why, because it had to travel from Minnesota rather than New York or LA, or from Europe. So, the boat was going to take a little longer than normal. So that meant we had a little bit more time off between rehearsing and getting to Japan. And it was a very complicated situation we were in technologically with the show. Like, Prince didn't do things the way anybody else did. Prince could have just as easily gotten a sequencer like Janet Jackson, and let that thing play and do all the heavy lifting. But he didn't want to be tied to any sort of, format or system that was running him. He needed to be running it. So everything we played was freehand. Nothing was flown in. I had to internalize the tempos of all the loops and stuff, so that when I count off the song, we're in the right speed. Like I had to. I have to say, for me, for any drummer, they would recognize the difficulty in that, and it's wrought with peril because wherever I set the tempo, it's got to work with the samples that Barbarella's playing and Morris. Barbarella's playing all the Claire Fisher orchestration and the horns and whatnot, and Morris is playing all the vocals and sound effects. And if I count the song off at the wrong tempo, ain't none of that gonna fall in line. And especially like if it was a song where there was no like loops running or samples up from me, I just had to be there. And then they have to play perfectly. People really have no idea how bad we were, man.
So much precision.
Yes, surgical. And to the point where no drummer could have stepped in to my position and had an easy go of it. I was always much more empathetic with Kirk, with the situation with Kirk, because I knew what he was going through. I knew how hard it was to do what I was doing, but I had managed to make it work. And my fear of failure drove all that, So and between Morris and I, it's like, and nobody's 100% on 100% of the time. And every once in a while, Morris might trigger a sample a little early or a little late. And I'd have to adjust the groove a little bit to make it fall right. That ain't no easy win. You got to know what you're doing. I had to understand how, and sometimes Prince's vocals would be one tempo here and then they'd switch a little. He'd drag the end or he'd drag the beginning and then they catch up to a different. It was a nightmare, but I figured out how to make it work. But Prince didn't know what I was doing. I was just doing the job, what the job had become. He had no conscious knowledge of how difficult it was for us to do what we were doing. It was just getting done, and that's all he cared about. And he didn't really understand that until Kirk had to take my place. And Kirk and I never talked about it. I didn't tell him what to watch out for. I was not vetted. He didn't ask. But, Morris called me one day. He's like, man, Bland, you something else, man. It's he said, we've been trying to work, the way the band had worked before. And, Prince just keeps hollering at me about, where I'm dropping the samples at. And Kirk and Morris had not developed that kind of communication yet, and I don't know if Morris could even quite explain what it was I was doing that made it work. You know what I mean? Just that I had his back. I was watching that Pinky, and he'd drop it, and I'd listen. And like, okay, we're in. Okay, we're good. I had to assess these things.
You were like the glue, keeping it together.
Yes, I was like a correction mechanism. That's how I had to look at it. And it's like enough, I had to adjust enough to compensate, but not enough for Prince to go, what happened? You know what I mean?
Yeah, subtle, yeah.
Yeah, and again, I don't mean to sing my own praises, but, we were, that version of the NPG, I mean, Prince had to change his entire way of working after that. Once he figured out what was going on, once Morris was like sick of Prince yelling at him, listen, man, Bland had my back. Every time, everything I did, he was watching my hands the whole time. This is not going to work like this. That took years to develop that, You can't expect Kirk to come walking in and just, so they did away with all that. He started over. So, I don't know even what I'm really saying, except that was like working, on the Manhattan Project. Like, so that'll get you keyed up, man. And then to have somebody who sometimes was an ingrate or, rough with you, they don't understand the circumstances you're under. And they're not, and they don't care. Prince was concerned about results, and he was not long on excuses. And so that kind of, that pressure, things got harder to deal with. It was like, man, we're literally creating a world. We're doing something that most people wouldn't even try. And, and I could understand his side of it, but I knew what the experience was for us also. So I think it just, the level of irritation, it all led up to this trip going to Japan in early 95.
Just boiled over.
And we didn't have enough time to rehearse. Like normally we'd get to where we were playing at 2-3 days before, get the gear set up, work for a couple days. We do that at Wembley all the time. The day we arrived was not the day that the show was. It took 2 days. Once the stage was set up, you got to feel things out. You got to, we always had that luxury. We didn't this time. And the show was not awful, but it definitely wasn't, the greatest Prince show you might have ever seen. But Prince got so hostile. He was so upset with us, and, that night, the next night, rather, actually the next day, he comes to sound check. Same venue, because we had like 3 shows there. He comes on stage and swiftly steps off the stage and into the house and goes back to the front of house board, to where he tells the front of house guy, what he wants to hear. And then he gets on the mic and tells us, kick drum, please. Bass, please. And like, okay, well, what's going on here? Prince has just stopped talking to us for 3-4 days. And during that time, we had a lot to consider, really. I think that was when we kind of decided, like, you know what, man? This is your house. We none of us ever, you didn't have the opportunity to lose sight of the fact that, you're working under a dictatorship. And that's fine, but without any common sense or pragmatic, it's like he could have very easily understood that, what was really going on, which was we didn't get enough time to prepare before the first show. But instead of accepting that reality, he just got upset with us. Stop talking. No prayer meeting. Dwayne came to our dressing room. Hey, Prince said, you guys, should just go ahead and have prayer meeting in your own room tonight. Oh, really? Okay, so now we're down to like you don't want to even pray with us. Okay, all right, and just we started talking, right there. This is before the show. Like, okay, we're all sitting in our dressing room going, I'm not with this. Like, this is not cool. So we get through the show. And I think after the third night, we were triumphant. And Prince all of a sudden, hey, great job, all of a sudden he just comes to life like, that was spectacular. It was, this is the one I was waiting for. We got it now, And but the four of us are just kind of like.
But he was always moody, right? But it just got a little more extreme.
I don't know if I could even say that. It's just, everybody has their own sense of justice, I suppose. And we didn't think for what we were being paid and how we were treated, like the collar. I said to somebody recently, the collar doesn't match the cuffs. Like you want the world, you want us to perform a miracle every night, and it's your prerogative and your right to expect that. But we will fail. It will happen. We can't control everything, and like the sort of irrationality of his response kind of was like, okay, it kind of put us in like, it's him and us. You know what I mean?
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.